Chapter 22. The honor of a house is decided in the blood of two worlds. Ariwynn had barely finished speaking when Rhaedor raised his voice, and the scar marking his face paled like a warning. He squeezed her arm to erase that serene expression that so unsettled him.
"That's not how it's done," he growled.
"Oh, is it not?"
she replied with the most calculated innocence possible, placing her hand over his. "I'm just following the example of my parents, my lord."
Rhaedor pulled his hand away immediately.
"It's not appropriate for you to touch me in public."
She blinked confused and he sighed.
"We will talk tonight.
I will explain your place and your duties."
"I look forward to it," Ariwynn replied with a calm she had to gather. And she thought with a fierce spark, "And I will teach you yours, my husband."
Rhaedor looked at her for a long moment. He saw her anger but didn't understand that he was being patient.
He thought she didn't understand him. And he was right. Not touching in public. Not showing affection.
Ariwynn lamented as she walked away. Who raised him? A pack of wolves. In her mind, marriages shared laughter, confidences, simple embraces.
Was she so wrong?
The longing for that closeness suddenly left her feeling utterly alone within herself.
She said nothing more.
She stood and walked toward the house, grateful when Selin intercepted her quickly. Work would save her from thinking too much.
An hour later, Ariwynn was exhausted. The servants tried, but everything went wrong.
A third broken cup.
A tub of spilled beer.
And now the cries of little Tormund shaking the entrance. The boy burst into the room chased by two huge dogs. Roderick behind struggled to hold them back.
"They think you're playing, Tormund,"
Ariwynn shouted as she grabbed Garthel by the scruff of the neck. Tormund hid in her skirt, whining non-stop. Roderick fell to the ground with a crash, the other dog on top of him licking his face wildly. Then Rhaedor's voice cut through the chaos.
"What's going on here?" The three looked up.
The Baron stood in the doorway, legs apart, hands on hips. Exasperated. She was too. Another crash of plates sounded in the back. Ariwynn clenched her teeth. "Come here, Tormund," Rhaedor ordered. Ariwynn wanted to step in to protect the boy from that harsh tone. She didn't think Rhaedor would hurt him, but his words could break him. Still, Tormund ran to him.
"Was that you crying like a newborn from the walls?"
Rhaedor asked. The remark had its effect. The boy stopped crying, wiping his little face with his sleeve.
"Those," he sobbed, pointing to the dogs. "They want to bite me." "Nonsense," Ariwynn intervened. "Can't you see their tails wagging? They're happy."
Rhaedor then decided, "We'll chain them up more often."
"But you will bring them food and water every day. If you don't, you will be punished." "Understood." "Yes, my lord. If they're tied up, they won't bite me."
Rhaedor sighed. At that moment, Selin ran in with another disaster, a new tub of spilled beer. Ariwynn closed her eyes.
"Have it cleaned up, Selin," she said simply.
Before fatigue could defeat her, Roderick announced, "Someone is approaching the gates." Rhaedor turned to her.
"It's your grandfather."
The news hit her like a ray of joy.
She almost ran to the door. "Really?" she whispered, smoothing her hair without realizing it.
Rhaedor watched that happiness with a faint smile.
He liked seeing her like that. And though he wouldn't admit it, he hoped one day she would smile that way when she saw him. "Are you happy?" he asked, not understanding why he asked. "Very," she said. She tried to go ahead, but Rhaedor caught her arm. "We will receive him together."
Ariwynn bowed her head, and they walked side by side to the steps. The gates opened. Her grandfather appeared, riding a white horse she didn't know. Tall, solid, wrapped in furs, a band of fur covering one eye. He dismounted with imposing dignity.
"Are you the Baron?" he thundered. "I am," Rhaedor replied.
The old man studied him with cold eyes, nodded, then turned to his granddaughter.
"Aren't you going to greet your grandfather?"
Ariwynn didn't wait any longer. She ran down and threw herself into his arms. He lifted her as if she was still a child.
"Thank God you're here," she whispered. We will talk later, little Viking. I'm not little anymore, Ariwynn said, laughing. I'm a baroness.
Put me down, I'll introduce you to my husband. She looked at Rhaedor, who frowned.
She softened her tone. My husband is very patient when my behavior isn't quite proper.
Rhaedor clenched his jaw. He knew it was her grandfather, but even so, it irritated him to see another man holding his wife.
Chapter 23. Chapter 24. She sought justice. He found redemption.
Ariwynn walked beside her grandfather, trying to make sense of her own fears.
I don't want to own anything, she murmured. I just want to be a good wife, to rule by his side, to be with him. And don't you think that will happen eventually? He asked patiently.
Ariwynn shook her head with almost childish force.
He'll lock me within these walls. And when he discovers I don't know how to sew or manage a household, he'll grow tired of me.
I know how to hunt, not embroider. When he sees me without the mask.
Why do you think he chose you? Out of duty.
Because of what happened with my father, she replied in a faint voice.
Her grandfather sighed. Rhaedor does nothing he doesn't want to do. And he loves you as his wife.
In time you'll learn from each other.
He has a good heart.
Ariwynn wanted to believe it, especially when her grandfather added, the king respects him.
He's young, brave, he even saved his life. That filled her with a warm pride, though she quickly tried to downplay it. He's stubborn too. And aren't you? He laughed. I'm very compliant. Ah yes, of course, he teased, amused. Then following your baron's rules will be very easy.
They spoke of losses, little torment, and the tragedy still weighing on everyone. Her grandfather confessed in a low voice that he had been approached by Saxon rebels.
They want to revive old glories, he explained, but they only bring death.
Ariwynn shivered.
Are you in danger? I don't know. But I will find out the truth.
Roderick appeared then to inform her that Rhaedor wanted to see her. He accompanied her to the castle, and along the way Ariwynn managed to get the taciturn knight to tell her how as a boy, Rhaedor had prevented the king from drinking poisoned wine. All by following the rules, Roderick said proudly.
Too many rules for my taste, she joked.
Upon entering the great hall, the tension was palpable. Rhaedor stood surrounded by his men, serious, firm, impenetrable. Ariwynn paused for a moment. Something inside her wanted to break the mask he wore so well.
And she did.
She ran to him and threw herself into his arms. Rhaedor instinctively grabbed her, surprised. She, very satisfied, brushed his cheek with a light kiss.
Good morning, my lord. The soldiers smiled.
Rhaedor did not. He knew she was challenging him.
But before he could reprimand her, he took her by the shoulders and pulled her close.
His mouth found hers in a demanding kiss, too intimate for a crowded hall. Ariwynn tried to resist, indignant, but the memory of the previous night betrayed her, and she ended up responding. When he pulled away, still smiling with that calm that irritated her so much, she spat out, "You've overstepped."
I never do, he replied.
With your embrace, you told me you wanted to be treated like
a prostitute, she interrupted, stepping on his foot. I wanted affection, not an insult. You're lucky to have married such a gentle man, he said with teasing sweetness. Gentle.
She looked at him, mouth open, furious. Maybe later we can discuss your temperament, he concluded, never losing his calm. Ariwynn felt herself ignite, and yet, part of her couldn't help but admire how that man could dismantle her with so few words. Chapter 25. Two enemies by birth. One love by destiny. When she finished helping clean her parents' room, Ariwynn returned to her own, covered in dust. She washed quickly and put on a light green tunic, with a darker over-tunic embroidered in silver. Selin gathered her hair into a small crown, though some rebellious curls escaped, giving her a bright, stubborn look. When the maid left, Ariwynn secured a small dagger to her leg, hidden beneath her skirt. At her waist, she placed the one she used at the table, the one that would also serve to kill Belric if the occasion demanded. Opening the door, she found Tormund and Gerylin, Rhaedor's first squire, accompanied by 3 armed guards. With your permission, my lady, Gerylin announced, we will remain here until the visitors leave. Ariwynn let them in. She gave her brother a gentle pat on the head.
There are games by the fire, she said.
Gerylin smiled proudly.
I'm good at both. I don't know how to play, Tormund murmured. You do, Ariwynn corrected him softly. You've just forgotten.
She closed the door and walked down the hall. Voices reached her from below. The hated Belric had already arrived.
She paused at the top of the stairs.
She wasn't sure if she could get through the night without trying to kill him. She touched the dagger at her side like one seeking a friend's hand.
Our moment has come, she whispered. And who are you talking to? Asked her grandfather's kind voice. She turned, relieved to see him. To my dagger.
I'm comforting it a little. Do you think I've lost my mind?
Not at all, he replied. Does it have a name?
Ariwynn smiled, amused. Only kings name their swords.
Knights do too.
Don't you remember Joyeux, Charlemagne's joyful sword? Or Roland's Durandal? They walked down the stairs together while he explained, joking and teaching, that every weapon had meaning, a symbol and a purpose.
And the bow you made me, she asked. To annoy your father, he admitted. She laughed.
When they reached the great hall, Rhaedor approached, smiling respectfully at the old man. He took his granddaughter's hand and placed it on her husband's arm.
Now it's your turn to disarm her, my lord.
Rhaedor bowed his head.
Won't you greet me tonight? He murmured to Ariwynn. No, she answered. And I'm keeping my dagger. Only if I allow it, he replied with kind firmness.
He commented on her hairstyle, her clothes, little things she instantly recognized as a tactic to distract her from anger.
You're as sly as my grandfather, she muttered, though her voice trembled between irritation and laughter.
He continued softly, you will not leave my side tonight. Ariwynn nodded. Sitting beside him wrapped her in an unexpected feeling of safety. She leaned toward him to observe the room without drawing attention.
Many wore hoods, she whispered.
Rhaedor's arm circled her waist. Ariwynn then knew Belric had just entered. Calmly she withdrew her husband's hand.
Trust me as I trust you, she asked him.
He looked at her long and finally nodded. Belric moved through the crowd, dressed like a vain red rooster with that disgusting dark stain on his stomach. Roderick followed, with a look of disdain. Ariwynn watched him with winter's coldness. He hesitated for a moment under that gaze. Good afternoon, Baron, Belric greeted Rhaedor, forcing a smile. Then awkwardly he turned to her.
You look well, niece.
I deeply regret your loss. Ariwynn said nothing. A look was enough. And her silence weighed more than any words.
Chapter 26. The courage of a woman, and the word of a baron.
Belric was served a goblet of beer, which he emptied clumsily, so nervous he almost spilled it. He barely burped, hiding behind his sleeve.
Where is the boy? He asked. You won't see him, Ariwynn replied sharply. He's already asleep, Rhaedor added kindly.
Ariwynn felt her stomach tighten.
I can't, she thought. I can't share a table with him.
She tried to stand, but Rhaedor held her back with a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture Belric took for affection. He had no idea it was a silent command.
Her uncle looked at her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes.
Too bad you didn't die with the others, she thought bitterly. He had always hated the clarity with which she saw his true nature. He had hated her entire family, really. He convinced himself the Baron protected her because she had poisoned him with lies.
But it didn't matter, he consoled himself.
The law is on my side. Ariwynn avoided looking at him. She remained still, untouched by the food, while Belric devoured as if it were his last meal. Maybe it was, she allowed herself to imagine. She knew he hadn't acted alone, but the waiting was becoming unbearable. When the meal was over, Belric wandered the hall, growing ruder with every drink. Ariwynn closed her eyes, the noise was torture.
Then she heard that laugh. It wasn't exactly a laugh, more like a caw. The same one she had heard the day of the attack.
She sprang up, clutching Rhaedor. Her eyes scanned the room until they found the man by the bow laughing with other soldiers. She recognized him without hesitation.
By the door, she whispered to Rhaedor. It's him.
Rhaedor was already watching her. He had noticed the tension in her hands, the barely contained tremor in her breath.
He just nodded. "See," he whispered. "Your uncle is a fool."
Only a fool would bring back the same men.
"He wore a mask," she objected. "But the laugh. I never forgot it. What will you do now?" "I will take care of it," he replied.
Those words didn't calm her. She felt tears threatening and desperately held them back. Rhaedor wiped a stubborn drop from her cheek with his fingers.
"Don't let him see you cry. You'd give him a pleasure he doesn't deserve. And then I'd have to kill him right here, and we'd lose the real accomplice."
His voice was so soft that Ariwynn felt a knot in her throat. In his eyes she saw something he always hid, tenderness. She didn't say "do it for me" because she knew he would. Instead she smiled at him.
"You're wrong, my lord," she whispered. "I told you I never cry."
Rhaedor's guard dropped.
That small gesture, that smile offered in the midst of torment, was almost a miracle for him.
He had to pull his hand away from her face so he wouldn't hold her tightly in his arms.
"And you're wrong, wife," he answered, regaining his firm tone. "I told you to trust me." "I do," she replied with a hint of pride.
"If I didn't, Belric would already be dead." He couldn't help but smile. He stood, taking her by the arm, guiding her with a mix of protection and respect.
"You've been brave tonight, Ariwynn.
More than many could be.
And I am pleased." Then she smiled with a slight challenge. "Is there finally something about me you like?" Chapter 27.
She healed his wound, he healed her world. When Rhaedor admitted that she was right, Ariwynn murmured, "If you're so pleased, will you tell me what you plan to do with?"
"Soon," he interrupted. "First I must prepare a few things. And now, wife, I think it's time for you to retire."
"The songs grow heavy, and your presence restrains the men."
"Restrains their spirits. And you think that matters to me?"
"Beer loosens their tongues," he said quietly.
"Once you're gone they'll speak more freely."
He was right, and Ariwynn knew it.
"I'll wait for you," she promised. "No matter the hour."
"I want to hear your plans."
"We shall see," Rhaedor evaded, walking at her side to the chamber door.
When they arrived, she did not kiss him. He felt a twinge of disappointment, but he could not linger. He had tasks to attend to before the night died. Inside, Ariwynn found Tormund asleep, curled into a small ball at the center of the bed.
"He cries out from bad dreams," Geraldine explained.
"Thank you for watching over him tonight," she said. The boy blushed proud. When she was alone, she noticed her hands were trembling. She sat down, untied her shoes, and let her hair fall loose, weary to the deepest part of her soul. "Where is grandfather?" She had wanted to ask about him during supper, but Rhaedor had given her no opening. Perhaps it was better that way. Elswyn would not have endured Belric's presence. Tormund stirred, and she lay down beside him, stroking his back.
The child sighed, settled, and soon both of them were asleep.
Rhaedor returned in the first hours of dawn. He found them sprawled across the blankets. He smiled at the sight of Ariwynn barefoot, her hair loose, breathing with an almost childlike serenity. After handing the little one over to Roderick, he closed the door and lingered a moment, watching her. So peaceful, so unaware of everything. He undressed slowly, unable to take his eyes off her. In his clumsiness, the sword fell to the floor with a clatter loud enough to wake the dead. Ariwynn, however, only murmured something, and turned beneath the sheets. Gently Rhaedor tucked her under the blanket, and a pang of tenderness struck him when he discovered the small knife she kept hidden strapped to her leg. Always ready to protect herself. It unsettled him, and he liked it. No one had taught her to be docile, or to need a protector. She was strong without knowing it, and that strength drew him more than he cared to admit.
He slipped in beside her.
The wound in his shoulder burned, and he shifted position several times. He was about to wrap an arm around her when she turned with a sigh and curled against him, flinging a leg over his body with such force that it drew a groan from him. Ariwynn laughed softly.
"Are you awake?" he asked, surprised. "How could I not be?"
She tried to hide her laughter as Rhaedor rolled her over to see her better. "And you let me undress myself when it should have been you undressing me," he grumbled, feigning severity.
"Another of your rules, husband?" "Another one you've broken," he replied, though his eyes sparkled with amusement.
She brought her lips close to his.
"Then you'd better punish me."
Rhaedor felt the world narrow around that smile. He wanted to kiss her, to sink into her warmth, but she stopped him with a light hand.
"First," she whispered, "let it be me who touches you."
She rose, her movement so smooth that her mane gleamed as it fell over her shoulders. Rhaedor watched her in silence, his arms crossed behind his head, yielding for the first time the power of the moment. Ariwynn leaned over him slowly, like a priestess officiating an ancient rite. She brushed him with her lips, a touch that was less a kiss than a spell. Rhaedor closed his eyes. His breathing grew deeper, more unsteady.
She smiled to herself. He's not immune.
When he, unable to wait any longer, took her by the waist and pulled her close, Ariwynn stopped playing. She kissed him in earnest, with all the tenderness and longing she had been holding back for days. The kiss deepened, wrapped around them, and the rest became inevitable, as natural as fire racing through dry grass. Rhaedor whispered her name, and she answered with his. The night opened around them. He kissed her with a blend of tenderness and urgency. Rhaedor held his breath. He saw her as the goddess he had imagined since finding her in the forest, radiant, proud, his.
"Will you ever overcome your shyness?" he teased, his voice hoarse. "I'll try, my lord," she replied, taking his hand.
The rest became a play of caresses, kisses, and broken laughter, a shared learning that carried them from tenderness into a desire that wrapped them completely.
And when at last they lay exhausted, Ariwynn began to cry. "Were you not satisfied?" he asked, worried. "I'm crying because I'm happy," she answered, hiding her face against his chest.
Rhaedor held her with a new gentleness, surprised by that blend of strength and vulnerability that seemed to define her.
"You are a mystery," he whispered. "It will take me years to understand you. And I'll suffocate long before you finish studying me," she joked, making him laugh.
Little by little, the conversation drifted toward the doubts she carried in secret.
"Everything is so confusing, Rhaedor," she admitted.
Promises, vows, what does one do when two loyalties demand the same thing? A word once given must be upheld.
"Always," he replied.
Ariwynn sighed. It was not the answer that eased her conscience, but the tenderness with which he held her was enough, for that night. Later, when silence returned, Rhaedor asked in a murmur, almost fearful, "Are you all right?" Ariwynn rested her head on his shoulder, and a small fulfilled smile curved her lips.
"Very well, Rhaedor." "Sleep, wife," Rhaedor murmured. "May you have golden dreams," she whispered. "I already have," he answered, drifting into sleep. He closed his eyes.
Happiness, a word he had always mistrusted, was there in that warm bed, breathing beside him. And he fell asleep with a smile he could not remember ever feeling before.
Chapter 28.
A marriage imposed by duty and saved by desire. Ariwynn awoke at dawn in a whirlwind of doubts. Rhaedor was still sleeping deeply, heavy and warm beside her, one arm anchoring her against him. Carefully she slipped out of the bed, gathered the garments scattered on the floor, and wrapped herself in her light tunic. She smiled to herself. She would have to tell him that he snored, though she knew he would not find it amusing, which made it all the more tempting. She loved provoking him, that serious nature of his made the game irresistible.
She went to the window.
The day was being born bright, warm as an unexpected summer.
But when she looked toward the edge of the forest, where her uncle Belric's camp had been the night before, something froze her blood.
The clearing was empty. They had left without warning, or had been allowed to leave.
"Rhaedor, they're gone," she cried, turning toward him.
He barely opened one eye, muttered something unintelligible, and rolled over. Indignant, Ariwynn knelt beside him and shook him.
"Wake up, please."
"They've vanished."
"You must do something." "I already have," he finally replied, sitting up with infuriating calm. "I sent them back to their home."
Ariwynn felt anger rise in her chest. Did you also let the soldier I pointed out go?
I did, Rhaedor said, washing his face with cold water. She clenched her hands.
He must have a reason, she forced herself to think. Don't explode, not yet.
Then can you explain it to me, she asked, her voice breaking between rage and bewilderment.
Irritated by her tone, he answered sharply. She responded in kind. When he tried to leave without giving her any explanation, Ariwynn planted herself in front of the door, arms crossed. If he wanted to pass, he would have to face her. Rhaedor stepped toward her, took her by the shoulders, and lifted her with ease until their eyes met, sharp as steel. Never, he said in a low voice trembling with fury, demand anything of me again. Ariwynn held his gaze with the wounded dignity of an offended queen.
He set her down and left.
She barely had time to release the breath she was holding when the door slammed shut.
He's stubborn as a mule, she thought. But I will not stay behind him.
Never. Filled with anger and the need for air, she dressed in a dark blue tunic, took her bow, and headed for the stables. She needed to mount her mare, to gallop, to feel the wind tear the fury from her body. Just as she arrived, Rhaedor was riding out.
He passed her without a single word.
Perfect.
She had no intention of speaking either. As soon as she was on her horse, she rode through the gates and launched onto the road. Just a ride, she promised herself.
No risks. Rhaedor, however, seeing her race away at full speed, turned his horse and went after her.
You've disobeyed me again, he roared when he caught up. That's not true. You never, she tried to reply. Silence.
Rhaedor's voice cut the air. Ariwynn shuddered, though she knew he would never lay a hand on her.
You won't hit me, she said calmly. That simple sentence disarmed him. I won't, he admitted, lowering his tone. A reasonable man does not strike his wife. Even when he sometimes has reasons to want to.
She lowered her eyes and confessed with disarming honesty, I wasn't trying to catch up to you. I just needed to breathe away from shouting and reproaches.
I don't like it when we argue, not so soon. I don't want this marriage to turn bitter.
Her words softened Rhaedor like an unexpected balm. They spoke then like two strangers who wished to cease being so. She spoke of patience, of what she had learned from her mother. He replied with his usual authoritarian clumsiness. And between Barb's ironies and small gestures, something loosened between them, as if a rope pulled too tight had finally found a point of balance. When Ariwynn challenged him to join her hunting, she is a lioness, he is a hungry lion, Rhaedor burst out laughing.
Very well then.
Be my guide. And together, they entered the forest.
The horses moved through green shadows, the wind in her hair felt like a promise.
For an instant, Ariwynn let lightness envelop her. The problems will return later, she thought.
But for today, let the world breathe.
In a small grove, she ordered Rhaedor to sit while she sought the prey. He protested, but in the end he agreed. He could not take his eyes off her when she drew the bow, steady and silent. He was hoping, he admitted it, that she would miss. Ariwynn knew it, and that drove her not to allow it. And then, between the shadows, a plump little rabbit crossed the clearing. Ariwynn loosed the arrow. The animal fell instantly. Rhaedor opened his mouth, unable to find a single word to say. His pride and his astonishment battled within him, and for the first time since he had known her he lost. The lioness had hunted.
Chapter 29.
Courage can rebuild a shattered home. Ariwynn drew the bow without daring to look at Rhaedor. She knew that if she did, he would see the triumphant gleam in her eyes. She loosed the string, the arrow flew swift, and the rabbit fell among the ferns. When she brought down the second as well, she gathered both pieces, and turned to her husband with a smile she could not quite conceal.
I'm fortunate that rabbits don't know how to use toys, my lord, she joked.
Rhaedor laughed, and in that laughter Ariwynn felt an unexpected warmth.
Well done, wife.
She made an exaggerated bow, amused to see such rare humor in him.
I appreciate the compliment, Rhaedor. I might almost say it's the first you've ever given me.
He looked at her with those eyes that seemed to be seeing her for the first time.
I would prefer a kiss.
Ariwynn blinked, surprised that he would break one of his own rules. Kisses were for closed chambers according to him. And that small defiance delighted her more than she would admit.
Then you shall have it.
She dropped the game and walked toward him, with a sway both shy and provocative. Rhaedor took her into his arms, and the kiss they shared was long, sweet, and left in both of them a restless hunger for more. They held each other with contained urgency, breathing one another in, as if the whole forest fell silent before their meeting. He pressed her to his chest, and Ariwynn answered with equal fervor, until Rhaedor drew back slightly, his forehead resting against hers.
It's madness to stay here, he murmured, his voice hoarse. It isn't safe.
Ariwynn traced the scar on his cheek. With you it's always safe. The kiss that followed was deeper, more sincere, more trusting, but at last Rhaedor forced himself to stop. Both of them were breathing unevenly, trembling with the struggle between desire and common sense. Later, when passion had ebbed and the forest regained its calm, Rhaedor watched her as if he wished to remember every line of her form.
You are a constant temptation, he growled, half amused. And would it be so terrible if I were, she replied, handing him the rabbits. Only strange, he conceded. I'm not accustomed to such closeness.
Ariwynn laughed as she gathered firewood.
And I'm not accustomed to men as reasonable as you.
Rhaedor snorted, unable to hide his pride. While he skinned the prey, she collected branches. When Ariwynn, still barefoot, bent to look for one of her shoes beneath a bush, he watched her with a mixture of exasperation and tenderness. Put your boots on before you hurt yourself.
After you answer my question, she replied softly. Who raised you? The king, Rhaedor said after a pause. He was a friend of my father. I lost my parents too early.
Ariwynn felt a tug in her chest, but she did not press him. She lit the fire while he finished cleaning the meat. They shared the meal without haste, and Rhaedor offered her a flask to drink. Thinking it was water, she took a long swallow and nearly choked on the strong liquor. Rhaedor had to steady her by the shoulders as she coughed.
Always acting on impulse, he grumbled. It's a miracle you're still alive.
Ariwynn, still flushed, looked at him with mock indignation but ended up laughing against his shoulder.
The silence that followed was peaceful.
Ariwynn curled into his lap, her head tucked beneath his chin, and felt it was a good moment to ask him about his brother Tormund. Rhaedor listened with limited patience but without harshness.
I'll send him to the king's court when he's older, he said. Not yet.
Ariwynn breathed in relief, though she could not help voicing her fears about the king and the terrible stories she had heard. Rhaedor, surprised, explained calmly what had happened at Alencourt, without softening its brutality but also without dramatics. Ariwynn was horrified, yet understood that politics was a harsh world, and that her husband knew it better than anyone.
I trust you, she said at last, looking him in the eyes.
That gesture softened Rhaedor in a way that was almost visible. With a resigned sigh, he drew her closer.
Then I'll tell you my plans regarding Belric, he yielded. But you won't like them.
Ariwynn lifted her hands to frame his face, gentle.
I'll be affectionate all the same, because I can be no other way with you.
Rhaedor swallowed, unsettled by what that sincerity stirred in him. And he spoke of danger, of the three options he had weighed, of the hidden web he suspected lay behind the attack on Ariwynn's family. She listened to it all, silent as a leaf, trembling at times, steady at others. When he finished, Ariwynn rested her forehead against his chest.
You are a just man, she whispered. That's why I trust you so much.
Rhaedor closed his eyes and wrapped his arms around her, as if that small gesture were a pact. And you, he murmured, are braver than you believe. They remained like that for a while, wrapped in the whisper of the forest and the crackle of the fire, as the morning continued on, and both of them understood, without the need for words, that something between them had changed irrevocably.
Chapter 30.
In the year of the Great Oath.
The king does not execute from war threats, Rhaedor explained, but his punishments are no less terrible.
He prefers amputation, blinding, a cruelty that sometimes kills and at other times leaves the guilty wishing they had died. Ariwynn paled, but returned to the matter burning in her chest.
And the other options? To wait, he replied, taking her hands. For now, I will do nothing. She frowned but kept silent.
Rhaedor, surprised by that calm, kissed her forehead.
I see you are beginning to learn patience, wife.
I will tell you the rest. Ariwynn kept her severe expression but urged him on with her gaze. She wanted to understand him and perhaps at last find a path toward peace without betraying her hunger for justice.
The soldier you uncovered last night, Rhaedor continued, was also released. But one of my men, having just completed his compulsory service with me, joined Belric's group.
He pretended to need more pay. He will watch, listen, and bring me the truth.
Why didn't you force the soldier to confess? She asked.
Rhaedor raised an eyebrow.
Are you suggesting I should have tortured him, little wife? Don't joke with me, Ariwynn cut in. I'm not vengeful, but you weren't there. You didn't see what they did.
I only wanted him to speak. He drew her against his chest, more in apology than tenderness, though she accepted it as such.
I accept your apology, she said solemnly.
Rhaedor was about to protest, but thought better of it. He had already learned how dangerous that woman's logic could be. He looked into her eyes and saw something as clear as an oath. Ariwynn had given him her loyalty.
And he would not fail her.
In mere days this woman had overturned his entire world.
He did not wish to think why.
Thinking meant admitting things he had buried long ago.
What is your plan for Belric? She insisted. To wait, he repeated. I'm trying to understand you, Ariwynn said, exasperated, but prying an explanation out of you is like pulling a tooth.
Rhaedor believed he had already said enough. He had a trap in preparation, and when Belric fell, he would sing the name of his accomplice.
But it was too soon to reveal it.
Ariwynn, however, was not willing to live on silences.
Wait, how long?
Until proof blooms like flowers in spring, she burst out, rising to her feet.
Years could pass without ever looking for it.
You trust a single infiltrated man, it isn't enough.
I made a promise. I swore to avenge my family, and I will. You will do nothing, Rhaedor thundered, springing up and gripping her by the shoulders.
Give me your word.
Leave this burden to me.
I will not give it, she challenged him, firm as stone. That ignited Rhaedor's fury.
You will.
And you will taste neither food nor water until you do. Ariwynn looked at him with the fierceness of one who does not fear dying for honor.
Then you will soon be a widower, my lord, she said, her voice trembling with conviction. I will die before breaking my word. It is my honor.
Do you suggest that mine is not? He roared. The mount shied. Ariwynn thought it might not be such a bad idea if he lost his voice from shouting. She would finally have some peace.
You would provoke a duel with any man over those words, he snapped. Then challenge me, she replied, on the edge of tears and rage. Enough. Do not speak to me like that.
Never raise your voice to me. Ariwynn clenched her fists, her heart ablaze. Always orders, always boundaries. Did he not see her torment? Did he not understand that asking her for patience was asking her to live with a fire inside? And in silence, while he imposed his will, Ariwynn felt that something was breaking, or perhaps something new was beginning to be forged between them. Rhaedor gave a light tap to the mare's flank, and the mount broke into a trot. He followed her in silence. Ariwynn did not turn her head even once as they rode back to the castle. The landscape slid past her like a dark rippling tapestry, but her mind was far from there. There must be something I can do, she thought, gripping the reins as if she could also hold fast to the memory of her own. Some plan, some way out, someone to turn to. The wind tangled her hair like ancient fingers, whispering names already lost.
But no voice yet offered her the answer she sought.
The only thing she knew with certainty was that she could not stand idle.
Not while her family's blood still cried out deep within her chest.
Chapter 31. The Peace of a Kingdom. For 2 dark weeks Rhaedor had lived in a silent war with his wife. He believed fury should rule him for the disobedience of everyone, servants, knights, even friends, but it was not so. Deep down he longed to surrender, simply to recover a gesture, a sigh, a timid glimmer of a smile on Ariwynn's face. He entered the great hall and, as he sat by the fire, noticed how one by one everyone slipped away. They avoided him, they feared him.
And he knew it.
He had been raised to endure cold, hunger, and iron discipline.
But none of that served him now.
Against what trial could a man steel himself to withstand Ariwynn, he wondered. She inhabited every one of his thoughts, even in the deepest silence. Since their argument in the forest, they had scarcely spoken. They sought each other only at night, in a wordless language. Remembering the first of those nights filled him with pride and a stab of shame. She had challenged him with chin raised, trembling in her robe, trying to resist. He, inflamed by desire and wounded pride, had followed her with the intensity of a caged beast.
"You're stalking like a panther," she had whispered. "And wasn't I your lion this morning?" he had replied with a half-smile.
Ariwynn had vowed not to return his advances, not to yield.
But her body betrayed her, with every involuntary sigh. And when he caught her in his arms, the beast she tried to hide finally awakened.
What followed was a burning, almost savage rush that ended in a surrendered, tender embrace, where both seemed to recognize, without admitting it, that this was not a simple clash of wills. Afterward, against his chest, she had murmured without meaning to, "Each time it's like the first." And Rhaedor, his voice heavy with sleep, had answered, "No, my love.
Each time it's better." But at dawn the truce broke.
Ariwynn, firm as a priestess before the rising sun, refused to offer any apology. Rhaedor, wounded in his authority, confined her.
And though everyone conspired to feed her in secret, she rejected every dish.
He himself in the end nearly begged.
Then he tried gifts, fabrics, dresses. Nothing bent her.
Ariwynn was unlike any woman he had ever known. As he brooded by the fire, the voice of her grandfather, Elswyn, pulled him back to the present.
"You are behaving like a child, Rhaedor," the old man declared without fear. "You risk much by speaking to me so." "It is you who risk everything," he replied calmly.
Elswyn walked with him through the courtyard, and with the patience of one who had witnessed many battles of the heart, spoke to him of Ariwynn's parents, a marriage born of convenience that had begun with shouts, flights, and clashes, and had become a deep love forged slowly by fire.
"You are both stubborn," Elswyn concluded.
"Be the elder, the stronger. Guide her with gentle words, not with locks. If not, you will lose her."
"And have I ever had her?"
Rhaedor asked, almost in a whisper.
Since she spoke her vows, yes, the old man smiled. "Though neither of you yet knows that you already love one another."
Rhaedor remained silent for a long while, until the shouts of little Tormund, armed with a toy spear, made him turn. He watched the child run toward the improvised quintain, a simple tilting yard, and Gerylin, the young squire, demonstrate his skill by hurling the spear at the straw dummy. The poor mannequin's head went flying, drawing peals of laughter from the boy. Rhaedor did not laugh. He watched without seeing, his mind still fixed on Elswyn's words, knowing that something had to change.
That his life, once so orderly, would never return to normal. Not since Ariwynn. Not since the moment she had ensnared him beyond remedy. Chapter 32.
Loyalty can cost more than life. Gerylin froze when he saw the child's expression. Tormund, stiff as a statue, let out a scream so piercing that the soldier had to cover his ears. Rhaedor reacted before anyone else. He ran to the boy, took him by the shoulders, and forced him to look at him.
But Tormund saw nothing, he only screamed, trapped in the memory of his mother.
Rhaedor pulled him against his chest.
The child's crying, at first furious, slowly subsided into an exhausted sob.
When at last he rested his head on Rhaedor's shoulder, the man lifted him carefully.
"You are safe, Tormund," he murmured, punctuating the words with gentle pats.
Ariwynn came running then. When she saw them she froze pale, convinced her husband was hurt. Rhaedor shook his head and with a caress on her arm whispered, "He remembered." Tears sprang to her eyes. She touched the boy with a trembling hand, and Rhaedor drew her to his side, an arm around her shoulders.
Thus the three of them went inside, bound by the same need for comfort.
Days later, Tormund had recovered his spirits and multiplied the trouble. Ariwynn was scolding him in the chamber while the boy leaned dangerously out the window, spitting between peals of laughter.
"Tormund, get down from there right now," she ordered.
"Or I'll tell your lord, and he'll teach you a lesson," Rhaedor added as he came in. The boy went pale and obeyed at once. Ariwynn, not losing her stern tone, informed her husband, "Yesterday he put honey in Jerylun's helmet. Today he tried to ride my dogs.
And now he's spitting at your soldiers. What do you think, my lord?"
Rhaedor examined the boy, who kept his head lowered.
"What do you have to say for yourself?" Tormund dropped to his knees dramatically. "I'm sorry. I won't do it again," he promised in a thin voice.
Rhaedor set him to work, hoping to keep him occupied. When the child left, the door had barely closed before he burst out laughing.
"It isn't funny," Ariwynn protested. "Father let him grow up like a wild puppy."
She changed the subject then, worried. "Selyn says you've ordered the chests prepared." "Why?"
"I meant to tell you tonight," he interrupted. "We'll leave for my home in a couple of weeks. But first I must take care of something. I won't be long."
Fear showed on Ariwynn's face.
"And Tormund? He'll stay with your grandfather. I won't tear him away from what he knows."
"He's suffered enough," Rhaedor replied, surprising her with his sensitivity. She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him.
"Then, you won't send him to the king? Have you changed your mind?" "Yes," he admitted. "I've changed my mind about many things." And before he could explain himself, Ariwynn rose to kiss him.
The kiss flared, multiplied, and soon both were caught in a fire neither wished to extinguish. They loved each other with urgency, against the wall, without gentleness, without space for anything but desire and surrender.
At the height of it, she murmured her truth into his ear, "I love you, Rhaedor.
I love you." When it was over, Rhaedor held her, unwilling to let go, his breath still uneven.
"You intoxicate me," he whispered. "And you do the same to me," she replied, resting her forehead on his shoulder. But when he dressed, his expression changed. "You said you love me," he said seriously. "Was it passion, or did you mean it?" "It's true," she answered, vulnerable. "I didn't know it until I said it."
He caressed her tenderly.
"You make me happy, wife."
"I don't know much about love, but yours pleases me." And yet he added, a little awkwardly, "Perhaps when I am old I will tell you the same." Ariwynn arched a brow.
"I didn't ask you for love, Rhaedor."
The tension grew until he cut the conversation short and headed for the door, determined to flee his own feelings.
"We'll talk when I decide to talk," he said brusquely. "Rhaedor," she called.
He returned, ill-tempered.
"What now?"
Ariwynn looked at him with feigned innocence.
"Your shoes, my lord."
He left red with embarrassment, and Ariwynn laughed so hard she had to wipe away tears.
Yes, she loved him.
And that certainty filled her chest with a new, luminous freedom. And in the midst of revelations, where guilt begins to dissolve and fear breaks with a sigh, two souls can meet.
Not from need, but from recognition. Not from the wound, but from the courage to be vulnerable.
Where the rose defies the iron, hope is born. Where the Saxon moon embraces the Norman sun, history ceases to bleed, and love begins to turn into legend.
Chapter 33. Between rebellions and oaths. As she recalled the arrival of the messengers, Ariwynn hastily gathered her hair, smoothed it back, and adjusted the freshly donned lavender tunic.
She went down the stairs in silence but stopped when she heard her husband's angry voice echoing through the hall. "So he ignored my summons." Consumed by curiosity, she slipped behind the wall to listen more closely. Who would dare defy Rhaedor?
"I did not speak to him directly, my lord," the messenger replied. "One of his men said he has locked himself away, mad with grief over his wife's death. He does not eat, he seems intent on letting himself die."
Rhaedor frowned and rested a hand on the hearth. Then he caught a flash of lavender near the entrance. He smiled, his wife was listening. and he decided to amuse himself a little.
Mad with grief, he repeated, incredulous.
No man loses his reason over a wife. They are easily replaced.
But a good horse, that would be a true misfortune.
Ariwynn held her breath, indignant. She stepped fully into view, hands on her hips.
A horse?
You would trade me for a horse? Ariwynn, were you hiding? He asked, feigning surprise, his eyes gleaming with laughter.
She fell into the trap and knew it.
Can you see through walls, husband?
You'd best believe it, he said, winking at her in front of the messenger.
Ariwynn blushed despite herself.
Forgive the interruption, she said. And he raised a brow. And for listening, she murmured. Oh, I will surely do it again. It is not dignified. No, she admitted, but it is the only way to know what is happening.
Where did this messenger come from?
Did I miss the other one? You missed him, Rhaedor replied, grateful she did not know he had come from Belric's house. And this one brought news of your mad brother-in-law, Roofguard. Roofguard, she whispered, a knot tightening in her throat.
Guilt struck her. She had not thought of him once since the tragedy. What would it have been like to lose Rhaedor, as Roofguard had lost Serenwy? She bowed her head and murmured a brief prayer. The messenger finished his report, and Rhaedor dismissed him.
Then he turned to her.
Ariwynn, tell me what you know of Roofguard.
I regret not going to comfort him.
He and Serenwy were happy, I saw it in every gesture. She broke off sadly.
And as a man?
Rhaedor pressed.
Is it possible he is so weak from grief?
She looked at him, devastated by his disbelief.
You do not want to understand, she whispered, turning her face away. And she thought with sorrow, you do not love me even if you share my mourning.
He mistook her sadness for the memory of loss.
He took her shoulder gently. I need you to tell me again what happened, he asked. From the beginning.
She would have preferred to avoid it, but she took a deep breath and recounted the scene. Rhaedor listened without interrupting.
You have forgotten something, he said at last. You said one of the hooded men was wounded by your sister.
Stabbed.
Yes. I had forgotten.
She struck him beneath the right shoulder.
I saw the blood. Interesting, he murmured. When I return from my journey, you will have all the answers. You always ask me to wait, she protested. You gave me your word.
And I also gave my word to my parents and my sisters, Ariwynn thought. Which oath should weigh more?
I have made another vow, she whispered. And before he could respond, she left the hall.
In her chamber, finally alone, the pain overwhelmed her. She broke down crying into the blankets. I will not fail you, she promised her lost family. I will bring you justice. Then the idea struck her mind with sudden clarity, Roofguard. She would go to him, draw him out of his seclusion, and reveal the uncle's betrayal. She would give him a reason to rise again. They would share the same thirst for justice.
She wiped away her tears.
She needed to convince Hamalda, and find another servant willing to accompany her. And no, Rhaedor must not know. She would leave at dawn, when he and his men had taken the road. If she remembered the old path her father had discovered, she would reach Roofguard's house quickly. Perhaps she would return before Rhaedor. And by the time the castle noticed her absence, she would already be too far away to be stopped. Chapter 34. A union that could change a kingdom. Roderick and 50 men were already mounted when Rhaedor finished settling the last details with Elswyn. With a somber air, the face of a warrior riding toward battle, he led his men beyond the castle gates. From the window, Ariwynn watched him depart until he vanished among the trees. Then she turned with resolve. She had to leave before the castle awoke. She dressed in a dark blue tunic, bound her hair into a firm knot, and covered herself with a hooded cloak to hide her fiery mane. Dagger, bow and arrows, her small arsenal. She descended the secret stair, crossed the courtyard in silence, and reached the stables. On the far side of the wall, Hamalda awaited her with Tovren and the horses ready. Within minutes they were in the small hollow where they had hidden them. They mounted and slipped into the thicket without a word. Ariwynn led in silence, following a hidden path among roots and moss, while she struggled to keep an inner storm at bay. They rode all day, without stopping to eat or drink, until physical exhaustion matched the weight of guilt pressing on her chest.
At dusk they made camp among dense trees.
They lit no fire. Hamalda shared out some bread, but Ariwynn barely tasted it. The cold wind forced her to wrap herself tighter in her cloak.
Her conscience felt like a red-hot iron.
To fight against the urge for vengeance, against promised loyalty, and against the ghosts of her father was breaking her. "What I am doing is a mistake," she finally admitted, exhausted. She had known it last night. That was why she had wanted to lavish Rhaedor with tenderness. She knew she would betray his trust today.
But she could not. Not like this. "Hamalda," she whispered.
The man came at once, startled, sword in hand.
"Did you hear something, my lady?" "No. Nothing."
Ariwynn tried to smile. She waited a moment as though swallowing stones, and then said, "Do you think we could ride an hour toward home before night falls?" Hamalda blinked, not understanding.
"Return to Montrevant."
Hope gleamed in his voice, and it hurt her. She had dragged him and Tovren into this senseless disobedience, without thinking of the consequences for them.
"Hamalda," she said at last. "What I meant to do was a mistake.
Going to Roofguard, telling him about my uncle, would have been disloyal to my husband. I am sorry.
I have put you in an unfair position."
Hamalda let out his breath, as if he had been praying all day to hear those words.
At once he readied the horses, and the three of them set out again.
They were riding as fast as the fading light allowed, when Ariwynn caught sight of the lake's gleam. She was about to suggest they spend the night there, when a thunder of hooves shattered the forest's silence.
Her heart lurched.
She tried to spur her mount, but confused it with desperate movements and lost precious seconds.
"To the lake," she shouted. "I will catch up with you."
Tovren fled at a gallop, but Hamalda stayed, sword drawn, determined to die at her side. The thunder fell upon them like a storm. A rider burst from the bend in the road, and nearly collided with Ariwynn. His horse reared, and her hood fell back, revealing her hair. She looked up and saw Rhaedor.
"Holy heaven," she whispered, on the verge of falling from the saddle.
Rhaedor could not believe it either. "Ariwynn," he asked, his voice strange as though speaking from a dream. "Good evening, my lord," she replied with a feeble attempt at grace.
"Ariwynn," he roared.
The fury on his face made even Roderick tremble, as he rushed forward to seize her horse's reins. Nervous, Ariwynn tried to keep her composure.
"It has been a lovely day, has it not, Roderick?"
He choked on an absurd laugh, unsure what to say.
"Forgive us for interrupting your ride, husband," she added without looking at him. "We will resume our journey."
"May God go with you." She tried to flee, but Rhaedor caught her horse's reins with an iron grip. Ariwynn felt the blood drain from her face.
Then a shrill cry tore through the sky.
Rhaedor's falcon was circling above them.
"Roderick," Rhaedor said without taking his eyes off his wife, "protect your lady from that falcon."
Ariwynn frowned. "My falcon would not harm me."
But seeing the bird trace its unusual circles, she understood the hidden message. Rhaedor was speaking of himself.
The falcon. His war name. Rhaedor. "I can explain."
"And you will," he replied, taut as a drawn bow.
Another shrill cry from the bird, and something in the air shifted. Rhaedor reacted first.
"Move."
He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, and set her in front of him, handing his horse's reins to Roderick. He spurred his mount and rode off at full speed. Ariwynn clung to him, hiding her face against his chest to avoid the branches. When they reached the lakeshore, Rhaedor ordered a halt, and sent 3 men to watch the road. Only then did he seize Ariwynn by the hair and force her face up.
"When we are home I will lock you in my chambers and throw away the key," he said in a low voice, trembling with restrained rage. "I will not complain," she whispered. "And I will explain, if you allow me." He did not yield. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see Roofguard," she admitted, barely above a whisper.
The jerk she received in answer brought tears to her eyes.
"It is a blessing you did not reach him," he growled. "But I was on my way back, Rhaedor," she replied. "I did not go. I could not."
He released her hair to grip her shoulders.
"I am waiting." She took a deep breath.
"My reasons were wrong. I wanted to ask him to act, to help me obtain justice. I wanted to tell him about Belric, to urge him to go after him. All because of my impatience, because of my desire for vengeance." Tears began to run down her cheeks.
"I have been guilty of disobedience, and of lacking faith in you.
I thought that if you did not act soon, someone else must do it for me.
But last night I understood that I could not go on like this.
My vow of vengeance was destroying me. I have placed my trust in you. And if you decide not to seek proof against my uncle, I will accept it." Rhaedor looked at her for a long while, struggling with his own breath.
He had been a heartbeat away from losing her. And she did not even know it.
Chapter 35. A seized castle. An impossible alliance. Yes, Ariwynn had been disloyal, in thoughts, in actions, in impulses. Rhaedor knew it.
But before judging her he needed distant silence, time to order the whirlwind she had unleashed inside him.
"Ariwynn," he finally said, "Roofguard is behind all of this."
She didn't understand immediately.
She wanted to shake her head, unable to accept that Serenwe's husband.
No. It was impossible. "He's hiding until the knife wound heals," Rhaedor explained, watching his wife's face pale.
Ariwynn was speechless, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she was hearing. Rhaedor dismounted and helped her down.
"It's the truth.
You were about to ride into the mouth of hell without knowing it."
She took a deep breath. "How did you know?" "Since you told me the story, I had my suspicions. That Roofguard claimed illness just when he was supposed to accompany his wife to Montrevant.
Then Elswyn confirmed he was one of the rebel leaders against the king, although he believes Roofguard is unaware of his own betrayal.
And the first messenger spoke of a wound taking far too long to heal.
With that, and his refusal to answer my call."
"Yes, Ariwynn. It's him.
I would swear it with my life." "My God, he killed Serenwe," she whispered.
"And you were going to confront him."
"You were going to end this, end my torment."
"I was going to confront him, yes," Rhaedor replied, his voice hard as iron. "But not for your torment."
"Don't think you are the center of my decisions. Roofguard attacked what is mine. Montrevant, your father, my lands, my people. I protect what is under my word. Your nightmare is yours, wife.
And you will have to learn to bear it.
You have been blind, selfish, and very reckless." He knew his words were knives, but fury controlled him. She herself had admitted her disloyalty.
And she had almost ridden to her death for a madman who would not have hesitated to slit her throat.
Ariwynn swallowed.
"And how much am I to you, Rhaedor?" The question disarmed him.
He had expected an outburst of anger, not that soft voice, not that dignified stance, head held high, shoulders straight, no defiance, only silent pain. Rhaedor looked away.
"Don't ask me that now," he growled. "I might say something you'd regret."
You have the gift of driving me mad like no one else. He took a deep breath, slightly calmer.
You don't answer me with anger. Is it because you know you went too far? She didn't take the bait.
Why Roofguard, she asked.
Does he covet Montrevant too? No.
He only wanted slaughter, Rhaedor replied.
Serenwe was so sweet, so affectionate.
Ariwynn whispered, shaking her head.
And he killed her.
Roderick suddenly burst in.
Falcon.
The men are returning. They are 3 times our number.
They come from the east. Roofguard.
Ariwynn murmured, trembling. Rhaedor said nothing. He lifted her onto her horse.
Roderick, protect her.
He drew his sword and ordered his men to deploy. The sun sank over the lake, tinting the water copper. Only minutes of light remained before the forest swallowed everything. Roderick guided Ariwynn behind 2 large oaks, and with James and 2 other soldiers, formed a circle around her.
"Do not leave her side," he ordered.
"We will die before letting them touch her."
"God keep you," Ariwynn whispered.
"And keep my husband," she added silently. The sound of hooves became a thunderous roar. The rebels burst through without concern for the water they came to kill. And the battle erupted with violence. Shields rose, and Ariwynn saw nothing. She heard only the clash of iron, the screams, the lake struck by hooves. Her imagination tortured her. She saw Rhaedor fall again and again.
"Let me see," she asked the soldier. "Just a little."
He gave way. "Go with them," Ariwynn ordered James, seeing how overwhelmed they were.
"I'll be fine with just one defending me."
James rode off. Ariwynn then saw Rhaedor cut down an enemy by pure instinct. 2 more charged at him, they fell just as quickly. By the lake, Roderick fought with no room to maneuver.
3 men pressed him.
Desperate, Ariwynn remembered her bow.
"Stand aside," she ordered her guard. She fired.
The arrow whistled and struck the first rebel in the neck. The second found the neck's throat. The third attacked Roderick while surprised by the arrows, he lowered his guard. She shoved him backward, and the knight fell into the water, armor weighing him down.
"He'll drown," shouted the soldier beside her.
Ariwynn looked for Rhaedor. He was surrounded, with no way to reach her.
"Do you have a rope?" "Yes." "Tie it to my hand. You go down for him." "My lady, I'm armored."
"I can't."
"Then I will," she cut in. "Ride with me to the shore.
When you feel a pull, drag him with all your strength."
"My husband would approve." She left no room for doubt. They rowed to the water.
Ariwynn slid from the saddle, took the rope and plunged in.
The darkness of the depths enveloped her.
She found Roderick motionless, nearly out of air. With numb fingers, she looped the rope around his waist.
Her lungs burned. She tugged.
His body began to rise, pulled by the horse's strength. Ariwynn emerged at last, choked with tears and exhaustion, convinced she had been too late. Rhaedor, meanwhile, had seen her dive into the water. He roared like a wounded animal, tore through the battle with blind fury, his men covering him from behind. When the rebels began to retreat, he stripped off his armor and ran to the shore. Ariwynn surfaced just a few steps from him. Rhaedor fell to his knees, trembling, overcome by relief that left him powerless. He bowed his head and thanked God like a man who had just regained his soul. Chapter 36. Secrets that only love can reveal. Ariwynn's sobs had brought him back to life, and to fury. Rhaedor thanked heaven she was alive, only to feel the reckless urge to strangle her himself. He plunged into the water, grabbed her by the arms, and shook her in desperation.
"I thought you had drowned," he roared, pressing her against his chest as if he feared she would vanish from his hands.
Ariwynn broke into tears.
"No, Rhaedor, worse. It's Roderick. I thought he was dead." He didn't understand, or didn't want to.
He shook her again, but she heard a cough behind her and cried out in relief.
"He's alive."
"Don't be angry.
"He's not dead." "You are a reckless woman," he murmured, holding her in an embrace that he couldn't decide was of anger or relief.
Roderick, soaked but conscious, watched the scene. Rhaedor moved toward him.
"It was my wife who saved you," he announced in a harsh voice. "Although she says she isn't foolish." "And she isn't, my lord," Roderick replied.
Ariwynn freed herself from her husband's grip.
"There were too many enemies."
"I did what I had to do," she said, still trembling. "Protecting you is my duty, not yours," Rhaedor scolded, exasperated.
"It was my life at risk." "Or do you think I belong to you?" she shot back, eyes blazing just before sneezing. "Yes," he thundered.
Silence fell over the soldiers, who, pretending to tend to the wounded, listened to every word. Ariwynn felt exposed under their eyes, and realized dignity was a luxury hard to maintain in times of war.
You are unreasonable, she sighed, turning to walk away. I'm sure you'll want to chain me up.
Rhaedor caught her in a second. Don't you dare walk away while I speak,
she cried again.
He loosened his hold slightly and murmured,
Your idea of chains isn't bad. Maybe that way you'll stay where I leave you.
Ariwynn took a deep breath.
She should have remained silent, but she couldn't. If I hadn't acted, Roderick would be dead, she said in a broken voice.
Rhaedor didn't answer. He simply lifted her into his arms when she stumbled in the darkness. She buried her face in his neck, exhausted.
What am I going to do with you?
He whispered as they moved toward the trees. When he set her down and looked into her eyes, he spoke with dangerous calm. Today you have disobeyed more times than I can count. And you have admitted your disloyalty. Ariwynn felt her heart shrink.
I am your wife, not one of your soldiers, she replied. Sometimes you are the one who forgets that, he retorted. He ordered the camp to be set up.
Seeing her shiver, he said coldly,
You look like a wet puppy.
Find yourself a blanket. Ariwynn watched him leave, roaring orders, and felt something inside her tear.
He's the most stubborn man in the world, she murmured, her soaked boots marking each complaint.
Roderick appeared with her cloak.
I thought you might need this, my lady. She smiled at him, grateful. Are you all right? She asked.
Alive thanks to you, he replied with sincere emotion. Ariwynn wavered between learned modesty and the truth.
I would do it again, she admitted at last. Even if my husband is displeased.
Roderick lowered his voice.
Your courage has shaken the men.
They revere you.
They have known no one like you.
Ariwynn blushed, confused.
You say that because you like me. I say it because it is true, he replied. You are the ideal wife for our lord. She lowered her gaze.
She did not believe Rhaedor thought the same. When Roderick, joking, thanked Ariwynn's parents for teaching him to swim, she replied without thinking.
Actually, I don't know how to swim.
Laughter around the fire froze. Rhaedor emerged from the shadows like thunder. Minutes later, already inside the tent, his fury filled the space.
Answer me with a yes or a no, he demanded, pinning her with his gaze. Do you know how to swim? No, she whispered.
He closed his eyes as if her answer had taken something vital from him.
You threw yourself into the water knowing you couldn't save yourself. She swallowed. Yes.
The silence was more terrible than any scream.
The tension continued to build between them.
The food arrived cold and untouched. They spoke of duties, gratitude, discipline, until the unspoken wounds began to bleed.
You cannot forgive me, Ariwynn said, her voice trembling. But I cannot forgive that you despise what I have given you.
My love. My loyalty, hesitant but real, my future. Rhaedor clenched his fist. Do only what I ask. Give me children.
I do not need your love.
Ariwynn felt something inside her die.
She turned away before he could see her tears.
When Rhaedor left the tent, her world fell silent, broken like a bowl too fragile for the life that had been imposed on her. Rhaedor had undoubtedly been taught a different law, find the flaw and strike.
That must be how he lived, Ariwynn thought, bone-deep exhaustion weighing on her.
She no longer had the strength to analyze his reasons, or her own. She was spent inside and out. Inside the tent, the dimness smelled of wet wool and earth. She stripped off her soaked clothes and hung them over the rope that stretched across the space, trying to clear her mind of arguments, orders, and invisible wounds. The silence offered little comfort. Wrapped in her cloak, she curled up on the mattress.
The cold still bit her fingers, but fatigue was stronger.
And there, finally free from judging eyes and demanding voices, she broke down and cried. She cried for Roderick, for Rhaedor, for herself. She cried for all she had given, and for all she still did not know how to receive. Her tears slowly loosened the knot in her chest until, exhausted, she closed her eyes. Sleep enveloped her like a benevolent shadow, and the night received her with the only comfort it could offer, the brief forgetfulness of her pain.
Chapter 37.
Where hope is born. Everything was set. The assault on Roofgood's fief would begin at dawn, and Ariwynn would remain protected by the men chosen for her guard. There was no time to send her back to Montrevant. The rebels already suspected Rhaedor's movements, and any delay would allow Roofguard to gather strength. Under the silvery light of the moon, Rhaedor walked along the lake's edge, reviewing the plan. Even so, his thoughts returned again and again to Ariwynn, and to the harsh words they had exchanged.
He had seen the pain in her eyes.
"I did not mean to hurt you," he thought, "but how can I speak to you when you run toward danger without even stopping to breathe?" He remembered how she had thrown herself into the water without knowing how to swim, trusting only in a rope and in the strength of a soldier who could have died in an instant. Always with an explanation on her lips, and not a shred of caution. Each step along the shore carried him deeper into his own confusion, until the truth struck him: Ariwynn did not believe she needed him.
That revelation wounded his pride more than any sword.
And yet, as he watched the surface of the lake tremble from a stone thrown at random, he understood what truly mattered.
He loved her.
He loved her with an intensity that stripped him bare. She, with her quick mind, her courage, and that fierce loyalty, had been dismantling his defenses without even meaning to. She had become the center from which everything in his life now radiated. And he, afraid of that vulnerability, had answered her with harshness.
He laughed silently. "The fool is me," he admitted.
His severity was a useless shield. Even so, he forced himself to maintain the appearance of distance. Perhaps, he told himself, it would make her more cautious in the future. Though a premonition brushed him, perhaps he was choosing the wrong path. He returned to the tent. Ariwynn slept deeply, wrapped in her cloak, the faint trace of tears still fresh on her face. Rhaedor watched her, feeling a remorse he did not wish to acknowledge.
He lay down beside her.
No sooner had he rested his head than she, still asleep, instinctively sought his warmth.
He smiled in the darkness. "Even in your dreams you seek me, wife."
The battle at dawn was brief and fierce. Roofguard fell beneath Roderick's sword. Rhaedor would have preferred to kill him himself, but fate had decided otherwise. Ariwynn was slow to awaken. When she did, the war was already over. Roderick told her of her brother-in-law's death, and she received the news with a simple nod, without emotion. She did not seek Rhaedor, though she knew he was alive by the orders that rang out in his deep voice among the men. When she was ready to leave, Rhaedor lifted her into his arms without a word and seated her in front of him on his horse.
"You will ride with me," he declared.
She tried to sit upright, distant, but eventually her back gave way, resting against him.
They spoke not a word during the entire journey home.
Both needed that silence. As they crossed the forest, Ariwynn reflected on her own guilt. She had acted on impulse, yes, but also from the heart.
Yet the night before had made one thing clear: Rhaedor wanted a wife who was obedient, cautious, disciplined.
Very well, she thought stubbornly. If that is what he wants, that is what he will have. No more laughter, no more tenderness. Only obedience.
But halfway through the thought, she felt the weight of her own foolishness.
How could she show Rhaedor the joy he was missing, if she herself chose to deny it?
And what did she lose? She had never truly had his love.
Still, her heart remained his.
Until death do us part, she thought with bitter irony.
The only question was who would kill whom first. In Montrevant, Ariwynn apologized to her grandfather Elswyn, who held her tenderly, sensing the sorrow in her eyes. Rhaedor, for his part, bristled under the elder's questions.
"What has she done to you?"
demanded Elswyn.
"Me. Ask what she has done to me."
Rhaedor protested, frustrated. He recounted her recklessness, her boundless daring, her leap into the lake without knowing how to swim. Elswyn listened in silence, and despite everything could not hide a glimmer of pride.
"I expected nothing less from her," he murmured.
Rhaedor sighed and confessed the heart of the matter.
"I want to keep her alive."
She will have to learn moderation, and I must guide her without breaking her spirit. Elswyn inclined his head wisely.
That cannot be done with reins, my son.
Nor with raised voices.
But Rhaedor, still bewildered by his own realization, could only nod.
Later, as they toasted the victory, Elswyn raised his cup.
To your future, Rhaedor.
May it be as you desire. Rhaedor did not answer, but deep down he knew his desire already had a name, Ariwynn.
And that nothing between them would be easy. Nor did he want it to be. Chapter 38.
A destiny imposed by the king. Rhaedor wasted no time presenting Odoric with his own report on Roofgood's defeat. It was a duty he had to fulfill in person. Among equals, that was how respect was shown. And Rhaedor always honored what he demanded of others. The 2 days before his departure passed coldly between him and Ariwynn. She still believed he was angry, and although it pained Rhaedor to see her so subdued, he told himself that perhaps this distance would teach her a bit of prudence. Just a little, just enough, he thought. But he could not leave without seeking her out first. He found her alone, leaning over a chest, and without a word drew her into a long, burning kiss, a kiss that confessed everything his silence had tried to hide. Elswyn watched from a corner, mused. He had always considered his granddaughter exceptionally perceptive, yet she was incapable of seeing beyond her husband's facade. Did she not see how his eyes lit up every time he looked at her? To the old man, it was obvious that Rhaedor was hopelessly in love. And yet Ariwynn lately was no longer the fierce, radiant young woman he knew, but a wounded creature. Elswyn decided to intervene, caring little whether it was his place to do so. He wanted to see his granddaughter happy, and yes, he also wanted the satisfaction of achieving it. That night, when the house fell silent, Elswyn invited her to play a game of chess.
I'm afraid I couldn't put my heart into anything today, she murmured with a broken sigh. Perfect, he replied, arranging the pieces. I don't want your heart, only your head. Use it in everything you do. You speak just like my husband, she said, moving the first pawn. And rightly so.
You let yourselves be guided too much by feelings.
That's not true.
Elswyn hid a smile. She was as easy to provoke as one of his hunting dogs. Since Rhaedor left, you walk with your eyes fixed on the ground.
Love shouldn't be a penance. A penance.
Me.
Don't repeat everything, child, the old man laughed. Tell me what's wrong.
Ariwynn moved a bishop sharply. He captured it immediately.
I won't be able to concentrate on the game if you don't tell me now, she grumbled. Very well, Elswyn conceded, leaning forward. Have you told your husband that you love him?
Ariwynn froze.
I don't wish to speak of Rhaedor.
Elswyn struck the table with his fist, sending pieces flying.
And I do wish to speak of your husband. So listen to me. She pressed her lips together. Fine, she yielded. Yes.
I love him.
And have you told him? Yes. But he doesn't care, she added before he could reply. He told me that love weakens. That I should reserve my affections for our children.
According to him, love is a hindrance.
And what do you think? I think, she murmured bitterly, that my husband is a man without feelings. Except when he's angry.
Elswyn burst into a jubilant laugh.
There lies the key. What key, grandfather?
You exasperate me.
Tell me exactly what happened when you saved the servant from the lake.
Ariwynn obeyed, reluctantly. She recounted the leap into the water, the arrows, the confusion. When she reached the end, she took a deep breath.
I thought he would be proud, but he was only furious. And what did he do? He pressed.
Ariwynn frowned, searching for the details.
He pulled me out of the water. I don't know how.
And in front of everyone he started shaking me, as if he wanted to take me apart piece by piece.
Then he hugged me. And then shook me again, and hugged me again. He didn't know what to do with me.
Elswyn nodded, pleased.
Just as Roderick said.
An indifferent man doesn't tremble like that between breaking and protecting. Ariwynn, surprised by her own words, felt a spark of hope.
Do you think? I think he loves you, Elswyn said calmly. Whether he knows it or not, that man loves you. She brought a hand to her chest. If that's true, then there's a problem. He doesn't know it yet. Then it will be your duty to make him understand.
The game continued, but Ariwynn no longer saw the chessboard. She was already plotting how to face Rhaedor's heart.
I don't know how to convince him that I didn't betray him, she confessed softly. Time will do it, her grandfather said. And your head will help. I have a plan, she began. Don't tell me anything, he interrupted. I don't want to hear your schemes. They're not schemes, she protested, offended. I will resolve it with honor. Checkmate, Elswyn announced.
Ariwynn smiled, radiant for the first time in days.
The game is yours, grandfather, but the night is mine.
While Rhaedor was away, Ariwynn began packing her things to move to her husband's estate. It was twice as hard. Every morning a wave of nausea hit her, leaving her exhausted. She didn't want to worry her grandfather, so she pretended everything was normal and fought to keep her strength. When Rhaedor returned 7 days later, her discomfort had not lessened. He avoided her with awkward deliberation, arriving at the bed only after she had fallen asleep and leaving before she awoke. Ariwynn bore both the physical and emotional pain with the same discipline. Only Elswyn's knowing winks kept her steady. Finally, the day came to leave for Rhaedor's estate. The early summer heat was stifling, and the farewell squeezed her heart. She kissed Tormund and hugged her grandfather.
I will miss you, she whispered. Remember your banner, Elswyn said. What you were will help you face what you are to become. I love you, grandfather.
The old man lifted her onto the horse.
Fear not the future. Trust your heart but use your head.
Rhaedor watched from the steps. He saw her upright, composed, as dignified as a queen.
And suddenly he felt a strange desire to be part of that intimacy, not merely a spectator.
After a final exchange with Tormund and some last warnings to Elswyn, he mounted. Ariwynn followed, surrounded by the escort, the dogs trotting at her side. While Rhaedor stared ahead, impatient to begin the journey, Ariwynn looked back, trying to memorize the walls she was leaving behind. The future weighed on her like a dark sky. But it was her own body that betrayed her first. Every so often her stomach demanded reprieve. She was tired, overheated, and painfully alone within herself.
And still, a long road lay ahead. Chapter 39.
The echo of two bloodlines learning to beat as one. Ariwynn nearly slipped from the saddle when exhaustion overcame her, but Rhaedor was instantly at her side. He held her firmly and positioned her in front of him, the horse's stride unbroken. She sighed and, resting her head against his chest, fell into a deep sleep, wrapped in his warmth. Rhaedor kept her in his arms throughout the journey, savoring the softness of her body, the faint scent of flowers and apple lingering from their meager shared lunch. When she sighed in her sleep, he echoed the sound with a tenderness he refused to fully acknowledge. As evening fell, he ordered a stop. Ariwynn could barely stand. She had to cling to his arm until the trembling subsided. Do you feel unwell? He asked, with that brusqueness he used to mask his worry.
I'm fine, she replied, standing with dignity. Just a passing dizziness. But Rhaedor took her shoulders and drew her close.
So little affection had been shared between them lately, that Ariwynn felt almost intimidated.
Is it that time of the month? He whispered.
She blushed, mortified.
We shouldn't talk about that. If we can't talk about it, how will I know when not to touch you? Their eyes met.
Ariwynn swallowed nervously.
Then, have you avoided me because of that? No, Rhaedor answered, unexpectedly gentle.
She lowered her gaze, afraid of the true answer.
Are you still angry with me? Is that why you haven't come near?
Rhaedor saw all the doubts she had been hiding on her face, and felt an almost irresistible urge to kiss her fears away. It was absurd to wait until they reached the castle to confess what he had been holding back. he, always so reasonable, had grown tired of his own reason. To distract her, he offered a simple task. Come. We've stopped by a clear stream. Refresh yourself while I handle the camp.
May I bathe? She asked, hopeful. After we eat. I'll find a secluded spot.
Later, he led her to a hidden corner among giant trees, where the twilight turned the leaves to gold. Ariwynn's eyes lit up.
Rhaedor, it's like a sanctuary. Intimate, he corrected, though he too had felt that magic.
She began to remove her shoes, and when she looked up, she saw him undressing without reserve. His skin, golden in the light, took her breath away.
You look like a god, she murmured. Your reckless tongue will get you into trouble, he laughed.
He helped her undress, unhurried but respectful of her space.
They stood face to face, breathing the same air, as if the entire forest were watching.
Ariwynn stepped forward uncertainly.
Rhaedor.
In time, he replied, stepping into the water. She followed, shivering from the cold. He called to her with a barely contained smile. She advanced, laughing softly until they were a breath apart. Desire flashed between them like a silent lightning bolt. Rhaedor wrapped his arms around her.
I thought I'd caught you like a perfect knight, he confessed, brushing her forehead. With sweet words and patience, but I wasn't born for restraint. I don't need long courting, Ariwynn whispered. Just the truth of what you feel.
He hesitated for a moment, as if disarmed before her.
I love you, he finally said.
Ariwynn's tears sparkled like drops from the stream.
And I love you.
The kiss that followed was complete surrender, fiery but also new and vulnerable. Rhaedor held her, covering her with his body for warmth, and between caresses and whispered confessions, he made her feel loved, desired, safe. She trembled in his arms, lost and found at the same time.
You give me strength, he murmured, pressing his forehead to hers.
With your love, I feel nothing could defeat me. Ariwynn smiled gently.
Now you are my family, Rhaedor.
And I am yours. He looked at her as if he had just received a sacred vow. When night enveloped them, Rhaedor took her hand to return to the camp.
Hurry and get dressed, he said with a mischievous smile. I want to take you to the tent, to undress you again.
The forest, silent and ancient, kept their secret.
Chapter 40.
Two souls seek a shared destiny. Ariwynn lay beside Rhaedor, still pondering his words. That night he had allowed a glimpse of his most intimate thoughts, and that trust filled her with a deep warmth. It had taken him time to learn to show affection, to name what he felt for her, and seeing him slowly open up made her happy. Still, a shadow of doubt lingered in him, an insecurity Ariwynn hoped would soon vanish. No one would ever ask him a choice as cruel as the one he feared. No one. That night, however, sleep began gently. Ariwynn saw herself dressed in white, the fabric floating around her ankles as she crossed the courtyard of a great castle shrouded in soft mist. She smiled as she opened the doors to the hall, and the enchantment shattered. A voice called to her, anxious. She did not know whose it was, but the urgency pierced her. She ran through a crowd of men who seemed not to see her, pushing them aside to advance. When she reached the center of the hall, a scream rose in her throat. Rhaedor was there, chained by hands and feet, looking away, unaware of her presence. When he turned, she also saw her grandfather, equally imprisoned. The voice returned, now filled with triumph. Belric. The mist at her feet turned red, heralding the blood about to be spilled. Belric raised a hand toward her.
You will choose, he said. One will die. And if you do not choose, they will both die.
His laugh, dark and sharp, tore through the air. Ariwynn shook her head in desperation, but Belric drew Rhaedor's sword and raised it above his head.
Her scream shattered the dream.
Rhaedor woke with a start, instinctively grasped the sword, and seeing Ariwynn beside him, held her tightly in his arms. With a trembling voice, he cradled her.
Open your eyes, love. It's only a dream.
I'm here. She clung to his shoulders, breathing hard.
It was horrible. Don't speak, he murmured, gently brushing the damp hair from her forehead. You're exhausted.
You pushed yourself too far today. Rest your head on me. It's over.
I'm scared.
If I fall asleep, it will come back. Rhaedor lowered his body over hers, resting on his elbows, looking at her with grave tenderness.
It will not come back, he whispered. This time you will only dream that I make love to you.
He leaned to kiss her, and his words, warm as velvet, began to dissolve the nightmare. His hands guided her back to him, to life, to desire, and the echo of the dream finally faded into the night. Chapter 41. When war divides, the heart finds its own path. Ariwynn quickly adapted to her new home. The first sight of Rhaedor's castle, a towering fortress with walls as high as cliffs, intimidated her, but upon crossing its gates, she discovered a cold, almost desolate interior.
She soon filled it with life.
She planted flowers along the walls, hung bright banners in the halls, and learned the name of every servant with the gentle care of someone tending a garden. Rhaedor let her have her way, though he pretended to grumble when he found her with her hands in the soil. His jokes dissolved any stern expression. In a short time the fortress became a home. The servants, once wary, now sought her smile, and celebrated every small change as if it were a miracle. By the end of July, Ariwynn learned she carried Rhaedor's child. Silent joy overwhelmed her. She wanted to deliver the news at the perfect moment. That night during dinner she waited for her husband with a mix of nerves and tenderness, laughing quietly at the thought of his reaction.
But before Rhaedor appeared, the squire Geryln burst into the hall. There are messengers from King William. They ask for my lord.
Ariwynn's heart tightened. She ordered them received while sending Roderick to fetch Rhaedor. When he arrived, she brushed his cheek with a kiss. Rhaedor responded with a gentle joke, but his expression changed when the messengers were mentioned.
Start without me, he said, leaving her hand in a reassuring gesture. Roderick and I will hear what the king has to ask of us.
The young woman tried to focus during dinner, even as the old Father Harwick repeated his stories for the umpteenth time.
But her mind wandered to Rhaedor, and the news that was slow to arrive.
When he finally returned, the exhaustion on his face shook her.
Is it because of King William's exhaustive survey of lands and properties? She whispered.
Rhaedor squeezed her hand without answering.
That silence tore at her.
Later, alone in their chamber, she tried to speak, but he stopped her. They undressed slowly, as if every gesture were a way to prepare for something inevitable. Rhaedor held her in his arms and in a low voice said, "There is no gentle way to say this, Ariwynn." She pulled back just enough to look him in the eye.
Tell me. Your grandfather has been accused of treason.
And Belric has requested guardianship of Tormund. We are summoned by the king. We leave tomorrow. Ariwynn's world shattered in a single blow.
I'm coming with you, she decided, tears falling. Don't leave me here. You will come.
It is your right. And your family is mine, he replied, holding her close. Ariwynn wept until she had no strength left, cradled by Rhaedor's promises that William was a just king, that everything would be fine, that he would protect their own. She kept the news of her pregnancy to herself. She knew Rhaedor would not allow her to ride for days if he learned the truth. He would protect it, as he protected her.
There would be time enough to share her joy.
The journey to London was exhausting. Upon arrival, she only wished to see Tormund and her grandfather, but Rhaedor insisted she rest. In the morning before he returned, Roderick appeared to escort her.
The king requests your presence, he announced.
Ariwynn froze.
It's just like in my dream.
I can't go.
Your husband awaits you, Roderick said firmly.
Those words commanded her more than they reassured her. She walked beside him through a maze of damp corridors until they reached a great hall filled with adorned lords. Everyone stepped aside for her passage. Ariwynn, heart tight, moved forward. When the imposing door opened, she found the exact scene of her nightmare: King William on his golden throne, Rhaedor at one side, her grandfather at the other. Still, she knelt gracefully.
Raise your head, the king thundered.
Ariwynn obeyed. To her surprise, William smiled.
You have chosen well, he said to Rhaedor. But cordiality ended when Belric entered with a triumphant air.
Ariwynn clutched her husband's arm, and he drew her close to give her courage. The king listened to Belric's accusations, Elswyn's refutations, and Rhaedor's calm defense. The scales teetered, and the hall's silence was nearly as heavy as the king's crown.
There is no proof, William decreed.
And if my knight vouches for this man's honor, that will suffice.
The treason accusation is dismissed.
Ariwynn exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she was holding.
But Belric was not done. And Montrevant, he spat. The law grants me guardianship.
The king pondered for a long time, looking at Rhaedor, then Elswyn, and finally at Ariwynn, who struggled to hold back tears.
This is a difficult decision, William said.
A Norman defends a Saxon his grandson, and a child awaits justice. I must hear more before passing judgment.
And the hall fell into suspense, waiting for the final blow of fate. Chapter 42.
In a divided land, a love story is forged. King William pondered, uneasy under the weight of the decision.
It is a pity, he murmured, that I have neither a Saxon nor a Norman here in whom to trust.
Someone does, my lord, interjected Ariwynn, her voice firm, surprising everyone. She stepped forward, moving slightly away from Rhaedor. The king looked at her with curiosity, and gestured for her to continue. I am neither solely Saxon nor solely Norman, she said calmly.
I am both.
My father was a Norman of pure lineage, and my mother a Saxon. And both used to remind me of it. My father would call me a stubborn Saxon when I disobeyed, and my mother swore I was a headstrong Norman when I exasperated her. The king smiled, charmed by her grace.
Then present both points of view, he said, amused. First, speak to me as a Saxon.
Ariwynn joined her hands, evoking her mother's voice. My mother told me that by your majesty's order, and by her husband's will, she was married along with Montrevant. She later fled, terrified, and sought protection from my grandfather. He listened, but returned her to her husband, reminding her that she now belonged to him and must be faithful. That loyalty united my grandfather and my father. And that same fidelity led Elswyn to bow before you at your coronation. My grandfather would die before breaking his vow. The king nodded, pleased.
And now speak to me as a Norman.
My father was loyal to his lord, Baron Rhaedor. After his death, Rhaedor brought justice. He took me as his wife, repaired the wrongs and punished those who deserved it. Ariwynn's eyes shone as she looked at her husband.
He is meticulous, upright.
Before acting, he confirms the truth, just as my father did. Impatience comes from my mother, I admit.
But my husband has taught me to wait, to trust that justice comes. And so it has.
If you ask me to whom I am loyal, I would say to my husband, and to you, my king. William tilted his head, amused.
And if I asked you to choose between Saxons and Normans?
Ariwynn frowned, not catching the playful tone.
I would choose Rhaedor, she replied without hesitation.
Because I know he would protect my grandfather as he protects me.
My family belongs to him.
And as we belong to him, we are also his, my lord.
My husband would never harm his own.
The king let out a soft laugh.
I wish all my subjects were so loyal. Then he looked at Belric. I will not go against the will of my vassal.
Your request is denied. Belric turned pale with rage, casting Ariwynn a venomous glance. She held her composure with dignity, shielded by Rhaedor's steady presence. William turned to Elswyn. I do not recall your oath, there was too much tumult that day.
I was there, my lord, Elswyn replied. Then kneel and repeat it.
The elder obeyed without hesitation, hand over heart. He pronounced his vow clearly, before the attentive eyes of Rhaedor and Ariwynn. The king appeared satisfied. Withdraw. Rhaedor, I want you at my side tonight at dinner. Voice of silence. Fate then calls to accept oneself without judgment, to stop punishing oneself, to stop seeking from lack what can only be born from fullness.
Thus emerges a different form of self-worth, calm, humble, needing no proof.
It is a time of emotional honesty. Each spirit must face its own mirrors, inner truths demanding to be named, old patterns to be recognized in order to die, shadows yielding to the miracle of a new light. In silence, Rhaedor led Ariwynn to his chamber. When they were alone, he slipped an arm around her. "Do you still doubt how proud I am of you?" he murmured.
"You were brave." "I owe it to you," she replied, feeling the tension finally dissolve. The relief was so great she nearly lost her balance. "See. Our king is just. There was nothing to fear." "Me afraid?"
"Never," she protested, with a tremulous smile. Rhaedor laughed, just in time to catch her before she fainted into his arms.
"Are you sure you're ready?" he whispered later when night wrapped them in its embrace.
Ariwynn nestled against his chest, warm, serene. They had just made love, and Rhaedor was about to fall asleep when she brushed her lips near his ear.
"I'm going to have a child." He sat up, dazzled. "Truly?"
He placed his hand over her belly, as if he could already feel the life growing there. He kissed her with a tenderness that made her smile.
"I am the luckiest man in the world.
I will have a healthy, strong warrior.
One who will be just like me." "How humble you are," Ariwynn laughed.
Rhaedor held her close.
"We'll return home slowly. I want you to take care of yourself. And don't worry about Belric." "I won't."
"You've won. Montrevant and Tormund are beyond his reach."
"That hurts him more than any punishment." "I'll worry about you anyway," he confessed. "If anything were to happen to you." "Nothing bad will happen," she reassured him. "When the time comes, I'll be strong like you.
I'll give birth with honor, without a single cry." Voice of silence. If times of revelation come, if ancient wounds are opened, if my soul must face what still bleeds, grant me clarity.
Grant me honesty.
Grant me the strength not to flee from my shadows, nor from the truths I have avoided speaking. And when that day arrives, may love, the love I give and the love I receive, be greater than my fear. In every soul that has known war, secret longing is born, the courage to reveal oneself as one truly is, without armor or shields to hide the heart's trembling. For only those who dare to be vulnerable can live again. Love, that which is neither imposed nor begged for, opens paths where there once seemed to be nothing but ash. It invites us to experience the world through trust, and not through the fear so many carry embedded in their blood. Those who move forward with an open heart discover companionship, even in the darkest night, a gentle, quiet presence that sustains and gives meaning, like a flame that does not go out. To be light does not mean never having fallen, but remembering that even from the ground, one can still illuminate another. For in every story marked by loss there is a silent promise. Hope returns when two souls dare to look at each other without judgment. When tenderness overcomes resentment. When one recognizes in the other's scars their own wounds seeking peace. Thus they walk not as victors nor as the defeated, but as human beings, who, among the remnants of a broken world, dare to believe in a deeper connection, more honest, more true. And in that humble, almost imperceptible gesture, the legend is born. Epilogue. Ludlow Castle, March 1077. A birth forged between iron and ash. Spring had come early that year, weaving warm shadows over the walls of Ludlow. The apple trees bloomed in the valley orchards, and the murmur of the river Teme accompanied each day, like a gentle omen. Ariwynn, who had announced her pregnancy in July of 1076, now awaited her child with the patient determination of one who had survived too many storms. Now in March of 1077, spring timidly showed itself within Ludlow's walls as she prepared for the moment that would change her life.
But when the hour arrived, patience unraveled.
Ariwynn screamed with the fury of a storm tearing the sky apart. Rhaedor, determined to hold her, to shout with her, and according to the midwife, to hinder far more than help, was expelled from the room with an authoritative shove.
"Out, my lord."
Childbirth is not a battle won by shouting.
"And why not?" he growled, red as a furnace.
I've been preparing for 9 months.
Outside, leaning against a column, Rhaedor huffed, bit his lip, paced 3 steps, then turned back again.
Elswyn would later claim with genuine delight that she had never seen such a great warrior behave like a lost fawn. The cries mingled with orders, prayers, and the constant ebb and flow of women's footsteps.
And just as Rhaedor was about to break down the door, a new cry pierced the corridor like a silver bell.
The midwife opened the door.
"You may enter now, my lord," she said, weary but smiling.
Rhaedor entered almost on his knees. Ariwynn, pale and drenched in sweat, held a small bundle wrapped in linen. When he drew close, she lifted her gaze and with a calm she had not known all night, murmured,
"Your warrior, Rhaedor."
He took the child with trembling hands. She had a dark lock of hair, eyes half open, and an expression so solemn she almost seemed to be judging the world she had just entered.
"She's perfect," he whispered. "We'll call her Arianel," Ariwynn said. "After my mother."
Rhaedor nodded, a tight knot in his throat.
And for an instant in that chamber bathed in the first light of dawn, time seemed to stand still.
There was only newly born love, the steady breathing of the exhausted mother, and the soft murmur of the baby. And in that sacred silence 2 bloodlines, Saxon and Norman, seemed finally reconciled, not by swords or alliances, but in the life they had brought into the world together. A new beginning. A new legacy. And a peace that, for the first time, felt possible. Ariwynn's inner voice. Every day I hear stories that bite into the soul. Young mothers who lose their little children, lives that fade away like smoke, time that is never enough. If life is so fragile, if death is always so near, let me not waste a single heartbeat.
Let me love, even if it hurts. Let me care, even if I am afraid. Let me forgive, even if my heart trembles.
Rhaedor's inner voice.
I have no proof. I have no guarantees.
I only have this small thread of hope that refuses to break.
Let it grow.
Let it hold me when my soul remembers everything it has lost. May hope be my act of faith, my quietest form of resistance, my way of going on living when everything feels too much. Ballad of Iron and Ash. In lands of iron and ash, where the wind speaks in hushed tones, an improbable love was born like a flower between sword and frost. When war split the sky and banners trembled at dawn, 2 hearts stubborn and alive sought a path beyond weapons. For where ruin reigns and fury divides men, the heart carves its own roads, defying shadow, fear, and name. In that land split in 2, where Saxon and Norman regard each other with caution, 2 wounded souls learned to share the blood that fate entwines. And so, where conquest ends, where oaths weigh heavier than words, a promise of steady fire took root, what war shattered, love made whole. Beneath an ancient, witnessing sky, among walls that remember the wound, 2 lives were braided into a single heartbeat, a story forged between iron and life. The end. Author's note. There are stories born from the clash of 2 worlds, just as sparks leap when iron strikes stone.
This is one of them.
The daughter of the Saxon Twilight emerged within me like an ancient echo, a murmur born among the ruins of a divided England. The year 1076 was a time of long shadows. The Normans had imposed their rule, yet the Saxon soul still burned in hearths and songs in memory. There, where Norman castles rose over conquered land, and old customs endured like stubborn roots, I discovered a story that demanded to be told. I wanted to write about a fractured country, and about 2 bloodlines struggling to reconcile. About the wound war leaves behind, even after the banners have fallen. About the fear of trusting when life has proven fragile and cruel. Thus Ariwynn and Rhaedor were born. She, daughter of 2 worlds, Saxon by memory, Norman by her father's blood. A young woman marked by loss, by the deep loneliness that sometimes settles in even when we are surrounded by others. Ariwynn represents the silent struggle of so many women throughout history, deciding whether the past defines us, or whether we are capable of freeing ourselves from what it taught us to fear. He, a Norman baron, a warrior hardened by battle and by the responsibility of holding a land that never truly rests. Rhaedor bears duty, the guilt of the men who died beneath his banner, the weight of survival. His strength is not only martial but emotional, that of one who fears showing vulnerability and yet learns to do so. Both of them, without knowing it, inherit a conflict older than themselves, the clash between Saxon and Norman, between memory and conquest, between imposed destiny and intimate choice.
But they also embody the hope of a country seeking a new beginning.
For where history bleeds, legend can also be born. Where iron oppresses, a rose can still force its way through. Where war divides, two souls may attempt to build a bridge. Writing this novel led me to reflect on our deepest wounds, those we inherit without asking, those we believe make us unworthy, those that make us wonder whether love is meant for us at all. And also on that which, even in dark times, keeps us alive, the will to choose from love rather than fear, hope that persists without proof, the light each person carries within even when they do not always remember it. To you, reader, thank you for entering this world of castles, oaths and silences that weigh heavier than words. Thank you for accompanying Ariwynn in her search for a voice, and Rhaedor in his slow learning of tenderness. Thank you for believing, as I do, that the most beautiful stories are born when two wounded souls choose to walk together, even when the world around them is made of swords, ash, and old resentments. May this story remind you that even in the harshest times, in war and loss, in conflicts that seem insurmountable, there is always a point where destiny opens and hope finds a place to be reborn. With gratitude, and with respect for all the souls who have had to choose between the past and the life they desire. Blumenfeld.